How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the 1IQ Football Talk podcast. Brendon and Sterling coming at you for yet another fun conversation about the world of football. Sterling, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Last week was entertaining week of football to say the least. Sunday was insane, and then lots to talk about throughout the week. It's been fun. It's been fun. Things are going well on my end. Not so much for you, I know, but are you still standing on the edge of the cliff there?
It's hard to really be on a cliff when you've already jumped. You
Yeah, you're
know,
still free falling. Okay.
exactly. At this point, the arms are spread. I'm spread eagle, just falling towards the ground, going, can the impact just hurry
Caleb
up
Williams,
already?
catch me. Yeah, you're just hoping Caleb Williams catches you.
Uh, I don't even think Caleb Williams is going to be a Chicago Bear, to be perfectly honest with you. Because at the beginning of the season,
Yeah.
he went out and stated that the team with the first overall pick, he had to feel like they were in a good enough position for him to warrant wanting to actually go to them. And I'm sitting back going like, so you're never coming to Chicago because why would you want to? And yeah, so a lot of Bears fans currently at the moment are sitting back going like, yeah, we're gonna get Caleb Williams, and I'm sitting back going, don't be so fucking sure.
No, no, he'll look at that and go, "Yeah, I'm gonna come back for my senior
Like,
year."
yeah, it's like I'll make how much in NIL for my
All
senior
right.
season? Yeah, sure, I can go compete for a national championship if I don't get there. And you know what? This game that's going on between USC and Colorado right now, Colorado has brought it back from they were down at halftime. It is now 48-40 with Colorado just getting a touchdown. And so they're
Oh.
likely going to be like this was one of those games that was going to be really really interesting to see. But obviously we'll keep a little bit of an eye on that. But moving into the world of football, as we typically normally do here at the start of the podcast, we'll jump into our game selections here going into this week. Obviously, game number one this week was the Detroit Lions versus the Green Bay Packers. We made our picks in that. We both selected the Detroit Lions in that particular game, and the
Hmm.
Detroit Lions dummied the Packers. And as
Yeah,
someone who hates the Packers, I was very much enjoying it. And then as someone who also hates the Lions, I was very much hating it.
yeah, yeah. You've got to be torn at that point for sure. But it's nice to see the Packers, lose a step at home, in Lambeau, where it's notoriously hard to beat them, especially for a division rival. And yeah, the Lions just looked good all throughout. And really, it was only that close because it felt like they let off the gas a bit in the second half,
It
and
did.
then Jordan Love started making a comeback, and they're like, "Oh, okay, never mind." And they went out there and they just picked apart that defense on a long drive and scored a touchdown again with David Montgomery. And just were like, no, you,
Traitor.
you are not making a comeback this week like you did last week. Not happening.
Yeah. And speaking of David Montgomery, that fucking traitor. Um, three touchdowns in that game, and what a performance. And,
Yeah.
you just kind of continue to sit back and go, like, yeah, David Montgomery is doing all of this good stuff. They signed him and brought him in, and it just continues to make you sit back and go, why would you draft Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round if you weren't gonna use him?
Um, you know, it's looking more like a brilliant play now, though, with David Montgomery performing so well. Because you get a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, you're able to manage his snap count in his first year, where we see a lot of rookie running backs come in and they get injured because they're given too much of a workload. And so this, I think, is good for them going forward because they're like, okay, we got David Montgomery this year and maybe next year, and then perhaps we can trade him away for something back. And then we got you good for, in theory, 2 to 6 years, because I mean, the length of a running back career isn't long, and so getting them right out, and we see a lot of teams where all they use them for is that entry level contract, and then they let them walk to another team. We might not see that with Jahmyr Gibbs because he's going to still have fresh legs at the end of that entry level contract, and the Lions, if they're still competitive at that point, will be like, yeah, now we're going to pay you and keep you here for another 3 years on top of that. And it's looking good. It's looking like a great play now. I think at first it was an insurance in case David Montgomery wasn't able to perform, but Montgomery he's lighting it up. And so you don't need to use Gibbs as much, which, as I said, it's good to have a really good 1-2 punch at
Without a
that
doubt,
running back
the
position.
only issue that I still have with it is that you do that with a guy in the second round. That, like, to me, you look at a guy and go, okay, you know what? We want you to be our franchise back, but we just signed a guy, and you know what? We're gonna be able to keep you. But that's a second round pick. You don't do that with the first round.
Who
Just to,
who would they have gotten in the second round that's as good as Jameer Gibbs?
true, very true.
That
But
you know,
the issue there is you're using a guy, and like, I'm just gonna pull up the 2023 draft class and go, like, this Lions team, they had some very much needs, and so looking right there, you could have gotten Broderick Jones to continue
mhm.
to help out with that offensive line. You could have gotten Emmanuel Forbes, Christian Gonzalez, Kalijah Cansey, Will McDonald, Lucas Van Ness, just some of these guys to just continue to help out, and that are
Mhm.
going to be impact guys right now. And this is the one thing that I always say with first round picks, is that when you're drafting a guy in the first round, they have to be a guy. I know you and I differ on the quarterback
Yep,
situation and whatever,
on
but
all.
for me, like, you're drafting a guy in the first round, he needs to be a day one performer.
Yeah, he needs to be a day one performer, but as you know me, I don't necessarily believe he has to be a day one starter playing every down. Like I feel like sometimes you get a bit of that tunnel vision where it's you were drafted in the first round, you're my starter now, and it's like, man, if you've built a good enough team over the last several years, you shouldn't have to rely on that first round pick. You shouldn't be desperate for that first round pick to be in your lineup because you're like, oh, if we don't put him in there, then we're screwed. And that's what it almost feels like sometimes. Whereas, I am more of the belief you should be building through the years with your draft. And so then that first round pick, he may not be a guaranteed. And we've seen it too, like so many times where guys drafted in the second, third, fourth, fifth rounds end up outperforming those first round picks. And so I feel like those first rounders, they're high on everybody's draft board because they performed well in college, but we always know that that does not necessarily translate to the NFL game. So teams that are in a position where they're able to draft that first round pick and then go, okay, you're still competing for this job though. I think that's good. Outside of the top three picks, top three, if you were that bad, then you really shouldn't be in a position where that guy's coming in and competing for the job. It's you're drafting the best guy available at a position that you're lacking already. And so that's where I feel. But at the position they got him, this is making like a really good 1-2 punch for the running game in Detroit, which takes the pressure off of Jared Goff. And as we've seen, when that pressure's taken off of him, he performs well. He's looking like a top 10 quarterback right now. And he's really only got one solid target in Amon-Ra St. Brown. Mind you, Laporta has been showing some
Phenomenal.
flashes, one of the best tight ends to start out a career at this point, which is
Yeah.
great for them as well.
Yeah, and like, again, you and I agree. Like, if you want to draft a guy and have him as a rotational guy and still getting meaningful snaps, but the thing is that David Montgomery rushed the ball for, I believe it was 27 times in that game, and like, as I just want to pull
But
up.
you go with the hot hand, man. Like the Packers couldn't stop him. And
True.
so that's like why would you stop handing the ball off to him when he's performing?
Yeah.
That's like
So
even
it
watching my
was.
Steelers. When Jalen Warren is outperforming Najee, we see him in the game more because
Mhm.
it's like why would you not ride the hot hand? Sure, we drafted him in the first round, but if he's not the guy that's getting us the yards, we're gonna give it to the other one.
Yep.
And I'm sure if the Packers defense had shut Montgomery down, we would have seen Jameer Gibbs in there a little more.
Yeah. My whole thing is that you got to ride the hot hand for sure, but
Hmm.
when you bring in a guy who has shown that he is a capable first, like, number one back, and you draft a guy in Jahmyr Gibbs at pick number 12 at a position that is so devalued right now in the NFL that if you only give him the ball, because he had 8 rushes and 4 catches, to me, you're it's a complete mismanagement of your assets. Yeah, he's going to be healthier for longer, but like, again, just looking down at it, this is one of those things, again, you and I will differ on a lot,
Yeah.
but it's neither of us is right, neither of us is wrong. um
No, well, and this is something that on draft night we agreed fully that this was a crazy draft pick.
yeah.
But as the season has progressed so far, I'm looking at it and this has such a high ceiling to it.
Hmm.
It's turning into such a great pick because Montgomery's been performing so well. They don't have to question that. And who's to say that, week 9, week 10, David Montgomery, has a knee or a hip injury or something, and then you've still got a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs behind him.
Hmm.
Whereas if you drafted somebody later who wasn't necessarily as polished, then you're looking at it going, oh shit, we might not have a premier back, and you see a big fall off in that position as opposed to just a sidestep.
For sure. No, and I agree. And kind of just like taking a look here at this class, the next running back taken after Jahmyr Gibbs was at pick number 52 with Seattle, was Zach Charbonnet, coming out of UCLA, which he kind of ultimately played a very similar role that Jahmyr Gibbs played at Alabama at UCLA. So
Mhm.
again, this is going to be one of those very interesting picks. But that's I think it's about time that we jump into some our picks for the upcoming week. First one, 7 a.m. game for us here in our location. First international game of the year down in foggy old London town, where we see the
Yep.
Jacksonville Jaguars. Might as well just move that team to London because they already play there and their owner has a team there. So they take on the Atlanta Falcons, and this game also going to be streamed with Toy Story, and they're going to live animate the game as it's happening. I sure as hell know I'm not going to be watching that broadcast. I'll be watching the regular one. Um, so give me your thoughts on that, and also give me your thoughts on this game.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, but we've seen the NFL. They're really making a push to get some younger fans interested in the game, and that's what this is. This
Yes.
is them going. We feel like we have the technology, Disney, to live stream a game and superimpose these cartoon characters over top, where it's almost like Sunday morning cartoons for the kids.
Hmm.
Only it's football, and they're trying some way to get those kids interested. Like you said, I'm not gonna watch that broadcast. I might pop on Disney Plus just to see what it looks like out of curiosity. But beyond that, I'm not watching the game in that format. But
No.
it's not geared towards us. It's geared toward the kids. They're trying to get that younger fan base. They successfully got all the Swifties last week with Taylor Swift at the KC games. So that's an extra 10 million fans for them, and now they got to go after the kids.
Yeah. That
Um,
that
Beyond
that'll
that,
be
like you
something
said,
we'll talk about for sure a little bit later too.
oh,
That will.
100%, 100%. Yeah, like you said, this is almost it's a home team for the Jags, or a home game, and they have to bounce back this week. They got embarrassed a little bit last week after putting up a good fight against KC in week 2, and then they go and get beat by the Texans, which just boggled my mind. I think we see them bounce back a little bit. They tend to perform fairly well over in London, so they've got that experience already. These guys aren't going to be quite as jet lagged as some of the Falcons players. So I think the Jags will win this one, but I think it'll be an exciting game. It usually seems to be when they play these London games.
Yeah, and I think this Jacksonville Jaguars team is a lot better than what we saw them perform against last week. Again, that was kind of one of those games where I think it was a serious wake up call to that team going, listen, you are too good right now on paper to continue to play the way that you guys are currently playing. And I think they're going to look at this Atlanta Falcons team going, listen, we know this team has been kind of shocking the NFL right now, but we need to go out there, get a big win, essentially in our home, our second home away from home. And there's not many teams that you can say have a home field advantage when they're not home, like on the opposite side of the planet. And the Jags do. And so this is a must-win game for them. And I think Trevor Lawrence, he's going to have himself a fairly big game, and the Falcons are going to take this one. Next up on our list is probably what should be the game of the week, where we have Miami taking on the Buffalo Bills. And this is going to be really, really fun because we've seen Miami really, really ascend this year so far. They put up a 70 burger against the Denver Donkeys. They don't deserve their other name because that's what they're playing like. And we'll talk about that team relatively quickly. And I think, obviously, after week one, Josh Allen kind of, really struggled in week one in that game. And, week two beat up on the Raiders, went out there in the next game and just beat up on the Bills, or pardon me, beat up on the Commanders. But Josh Allen himself also didn't have that great of a game, only 218 yards, touchdown, and a sack. So not necessarily a game that you would expect from him. Obviously, they won 37-3, but when Sam Howell throws 4 interceptions, it's one of those things. You should be seeing those numbers for Josh Allen at a much higher level. At least that's what I would be thinking. Obviously, the run game, Josh Allen got a rushing touchdown, and Latavius Murray also got one, but it's kind of one of those things where I was like, man, it feels like that score line should be a lot higher. But I think Miami right now, they're just too good of a team. That Vic Fangio defense is Vic Fangio is probably the best DC in the NFL right now, and whenever he gets his hands on a defense, they are just the best defense in the league. And I think Miami are going to walk away and win. Waddle is also going to be back this week, so Tua is not just going to have Tyreek. And so I think Miami is going to win this one probably a little bit easier than what I think a lot of people expect.
Yeah, I'm not expecting it to be easy. I also will be picking the Dolphins here because at this point they've just been so dominant. It's hard to pick against them. That being said, the Bills, they did bounce back after that week one. I know last week the stat line wasn't necessarily there, but like you said, when your opponent's throwing interception after interception, you don't have to go out and light up the scoreboard. Like you can go out and you can slow play, you can run the ball a bit more and play the time of possession game and still win pretty easily. And that's what I feel like the Bills did last week. They weren't going for we're going to blow them out and embarrass them like the Dolphins did to the Broncos.
Well, they still blew them out and embarrassed them.
Yeah, but not in the same sort of manner.
Yes.
It was a natural football pace. Whereas the Dolphins, it really felt like they were planning their celebrations before they even scored the touchdowns.
Mike McDaniels was literally going into the stands and asking fans what play they should run.
Right? Like it was a different beast for sure. But, we expected last year, both these teams were very explosive offensively, and we thought, oh man, these are going to be like big, high-scoring games, and they weren't. They were tighter games, they were tough games, and I expect the same. This is a big divisional game. They play each other twice each year, and it's ultimately going to be who wins this division is going to come down to these two games that these tems play against each other. I think it's going to be a little bit of a tighter game. There's going to be a little bit more physicality. It's the question is, will that Bills defense be able to stop Tyreek Hill, and Raheem Mostert? And these guys are just tearing up the league right now. This was a tough one to pick. I only picked the Dolphins because, like I said, until they show me the weakness, then it's hard to ride them off hand.
Yeah.
They've just been too good at this point. And as you mentioned with the defense, this is still without Jalen Ramsey. He's still not playing. Like, once you plug that guy into that secondary, this team's going to get that much better. And so I'm excited to see this game. I'm surprised they didn't try to flex this one. I know it's too early in the season for them to be able to be doing a lot of that flexing, unfortunately. But I expect the later season game to get flexed to either game of the week or a primetime game.
without a doubt. And now going to the game that should be Sunday Night Football, just to torture football fans, because why the fuck not, is we have the Denver Donkeys versus the Chicago Baby Cubs.
Sunday Night Football. It should be like Friday morning 3 a.m. football. Just get it on. Just let them play the game. Don't televise it. Just sweep it under the rug. This one was hard for me to pick just because I didn't want to pick either one of these teams. Like I almost wanted to,
It's hard.
right? I want to be like, no, it's going to be a 0-0 tie. Because both of these teams are just garbage.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate because the Bears on paper have so much talent that is being mismanaged. And it's bizarre because we talked last year, you got yourself a new GM, a new head coach, and things were looking like they were going in the right direction. And then I don't know if like they all went camping over the off season and brought Matt Canada with them. And he's like, this is what you should do. This is how you call plays. And now they just look like complete dog shit. And I don't get it. Even so, it was difficult for me. I went with home field advantage. And I'm picking the Bears to win.
How the fuck are you picking the Bears to win? Okay, yeah, I think Rant Street might start a little sooner than expected. I'm picking the Broncos. The fact that you are home field advantage, you're facing a team that lost they had 70 points dropped on them last week, and you're the home team. You're 3.5 favorite or 3.5 point dogs going into this game. That just shows how bad this team is. And to me, the Bears, this is probably their last opportunity to win a game this year.
Yeah.
And this team looks so dysfunctional. Last week against the Chiefs, we all knew that the Bears weren't going to win that game. But you would have hoped that they would have shown a little bit more fight in that game than what they did. After their first drive, it was essentially just like, we lost. I guess we'll just sit back, put the hands behind the head, just chill out, relax, just get real comfortable. And they were just like, yes, Kansas City, yes, Mr. Mahomes, I'm going to bend down and present myself. Please have your way. And that's really what it was. And every single game that I've watched this year from this team, they just have no fight. They have no willingness to actually really show like they want to compete. And at least with the Broncos, they've played 2 games of where it was a dogfight in both of them. Granted, last week it was demoralizing. It was one of the worst defeats in NFL history. But they still showed fight in those first 2 weeks. The Bears have shown no fight in any week. And for me, I just look at that and I go, yeah, it's at home, but I just can't see the Broncos not winning this game. And to me, I was asked this earlier when I was doing a Bears podcast. I was asked to give a final score prediction. I said it was going to be, I think, 35-17. So the Bears are going to get 17 points. But the Bears defense, they have Jalen Johnson out, who's their starting corner. They have Eddie Jackson out. They have Kyler Gordon out. They have Josh Blackwell out. So their secondary is pretty much non-existent at this point. And even with all of those guys in there, their secondary was non-existent. And, as much as we like to make fun of Russell Wilson, like, he's still been decently productive this year. Like, it's not back to the let Russ cook days, because, I don't think we'll ever get back to those days. But, yeah, for me, there is, if you were to ask me to put a number of percentage on what I think the Bears' odds are to win this game, I would say it's 0.05. Not even a percent.
And like, I get it. This was a hard one for me to pick too. Like, I couldn't really find a favor in either team, and we've seen Russ do okay so far this year, better than last year at least. But after getting beat down like that, that's so demoralizing. Like, we see teams and we talk about them bouncing back after a bad loss, but that was beyond a bad loss. And so I don't know if they're going to be able to bounce back in 1 week from that. Like that, there were so many problems with that game. And then on the other side of it, like the Bears have looked terrible. But every game, even though they're not fighting and they're not in it, you do see flashes. You see a bit of that connection between Fields and DJ Moore. You see a little bit of the defense flash here and there. And at some point, they're going to be able to put it together for at least one game this year. And as you said, this is the most likely one that's going to happen. Their opponents just get tougher from here on. And so I looked at it and, with the Vegas odds against them, and it's like you're at home to a team that just lost by 50 points and you're still underdogs. It feels like the betting line is trying to goad people into that and be like, yeah, bet on the Broncos, they're going to win. And I think the Bears at home are going to be able to eke out an upset. I agree with you on them probably only scoring about 17 points. I don't see the Broncos putting up 35. Even against that depleted secondary, it's going to be a game decided by a field goal at the end, and we'll see what the weather's like too. We're getting into October now. The weather in Chicago gets a little grosser. Maybe we see some nasty weather that plays in the Bears' favor.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, man. This was a really hard one to pick. I didn't want to choose either one of these teams.
I don't know the last time that a game between two teams has been this bad. Because you have two of the teams, like right now, if you're asking Broncos fans, they're saying they're the worst team in the NFL. And then you ask Chicago Bears fans, they're like, hold up a second. No, we're the worst team in the NFL. It's like two guys with micro wieners saying, no, mine's smaller. No, mine's smaller. Like, that's kind of what it feels like. I don't know the last time we've had two teams be this bad going up against each other in a long time, because it's almost like you never have these two teams be both horrifically as bad. Like you essentially have two teams right now that are saying, yeah, we could likely go winless this season, go up against each other. Like you almost never have a team where you're like, yeah, they're going to go winless. Right now we have two and they have to face off against each other and you're sitting back going like, pfft. But to give a little bit of hope for Bears fans, Caleb Williams obviously just finished up today's game through 403 passing yards, 6 touchdowns. So Williams now, after I think this is game 5 for him, is now over 1,600 passing yards and has 24 total touchdowns on the season.
Yeah, that's great. Though, as we discussed before we went live here, Caleb Williams has made it public that if he doesn't feel like the team that gets that first overall pick is in a place that they're going to, be competitive within the first year or two of his professional playing time, he's just going to opt to come back for his senior year and play for another Heisman and a national championship.
Yep.
And honestly, I heard you say that the Bears don't feel like they're in that place. They don't feel like they're in a place where they're going to be able to compete with, the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers and probably the best 0-3 team in the league, the Minnesota Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a glimmer of hope, but I don't know if Caleb's gonna want to play in Chicago, unfortunately.
Yeah. I've resigned myself to say at this point that Caleb Williams, if he sees the Bears with the number 1 overall pick, unless something drastically changes and the Bears somehow turn their season around and Carolina holds the number 1 overall pick, that could be the only possible way where, like, let's say the Bears go out there, win 5 games, and they start to look better, and it's blah blah blah, and they go out there, hire an offensive head coach, and Caleb Williams kind of looks at that and goes, you know what, this is a team that I could see. They have the number 1 overall pick. They also have a pretty decently high pick. That's the only possible way. It's because of the Carolina Panthers pick that the Bears currently have. But moving forward now over to the rivalry game between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns. Sterling.
Man, this is going to be a nasty game. These teams are going to beat each other up. I don't know if both quarterbacks are going to get out of this game without an injury. to be honest with you. You look at that linebacking core in Baltimore, they're going to be getting after Deshaun Watson after seeing what Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt were able to do to him. They're going to be putting the pressure on and getting after him. And then on the other side of it, Myles Garrett is,
He's playing at a defensive player of the year level right now.
No, he's not. He's playing good, but he's still fourth in the voting there for me. You got Micah Parsons, T.J. Watt, and Nick Bosa, all playing way better than that. Like, Myles Garrett is not going to win Defensive Player of the Year, hands down. Either way, he is going to want to get after Lamar Jackson, and he has in the past weeks. He has been playing well. He's playing like a top 3 to 5 rusher. This is going to be a fun one. I'm likely not going to watch most of it because my Steelers play at the same time, but I will be flipping to it during commercial breaks just because, this division is tight right now, as I predicted at the beginning of the season it would be. I don't think the Browns are quite at the point yet where they're going to collapse. It's coming soon. Maybe this week is the catalyst. Maybe this is what causes it. They've already lost Nick Chubb. If Deshaun Watson goes down or anything like that, then this Browns team is going to be on a nosedive to the bottom of the AFC North. But this week, I think, with how much better their running game is and how this division, whenever they're playing against each other, it comes down to the defense and the run game. Who's going to perform better? And the Browns defense has been one of the best in the league right now. Like, they're up there with the 49ers and the Cowboys in terms of quality of defensive play, in my opinion. So for me, I had to go with the Browns this week.
I know that pains you massively to say that.
It would have pained me to pick either one of these teams just because I don't like either of them. But
it's kind of like me last week with the Lions and Packers.
Right.
Yeah. This was probably one of the toughest games for me to pick, just because obviously the game is in Cleveland. It's going to be bloody. It's going to be very, 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 very physical. I don't really have a lot of faith in Deshaun Watson. Right now he looked like a shell of his former self, and he just does not look good right now. And ultimately, I think Lamar is probably going to have the better day. It's going to be a low-scoring game, and I think due to Lamar having the better day out of the two, I think I'm going to give the Ravens the edge in this one. But it is going to be, if you like bloody, bruised, old-school football, this is a game that you're going to want to watch. But
yeah.
Again, I always say every week, there's one game a week where I'm going to be flip-flopping a lot, and for me, this is probably going to be the game. Right now, I have the Ravens, but I could easily be convinced of the Browns. I just think, again, Lamar is going to have the better day, and I think that's ultimately going to be the difference. And if, like what you're saying, both quarterbacks do go down, I believe in the Ravens backup a hell of a lot more than I do the Browns.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily mean the quarterbacks are going to go down, but this is a game where it's not the quarterbacks that'll decide it, it's the running backs. And I have more faith in the Cleveland Browns running back room right now than I do in
Baltimore.
The Baltimore running room. Because, really, the Baltimore running back room, it's led by Lamar Jackson, which is not a good thing when your quarterback is going to be probably rushing for more yards, whereas Ford has stepped in and
fairly
is
nicely.
serviceable in replacement of Chubb after that horrific injury.
And then you're also getting Kareem Hunt back, who is...
well now. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so that is ultimately why I went with Cleveland at this point, because right now they're just, with the defense and the running backs, they're looking better. Give it a couple more weeks and they'll start to self-destruct as the Cleveland Browns do on a yearly basis.
Yes, indeed. But now moving over to another one of your division rivals in the Cincinnati Bengals, going down to Nashville, Tennessee to take on the Titans.
Well, the Titans haven't looked great. up to this point. There's a lot of talks that it's time to make the switch at quarterback for them. Get Tannehill out of there. He's not been performing well. That being said, my focus is more on the Cincinnati Bengals. They surprised me by starting Joe Burrow on Monday night. I really thought that the smarter move would have been to sit him and let him heal up. The good news for them is he reported he felt no regression after that game. He still didn't look great, but he was safe. He was protected. He didn't take any bad hits. He didn't tweak that calf injury any further, which is good for the Cincinnati Bengals going forward because presumably he's going to be healthier this week than he was last week. This dude is a baller, and he's got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and so many weapons. It's only a matter of time before these guys finally ball out, and I feel like this might be their breakout week where we finally see Joe Burrow put up some numbers. They were on the precipice of being one of the biggest letdowns this season. We don't see teams start 0-3 and make the playoffs. And with how tight this division's been already, that was a must-win game for them on Monday. And they managed to pull it out. It was a gritty win, which is good for them going forward. I think they have a little less grit this week to deal with. I think they win this game pretty easily. They're gonna finally show what the Cincinnati Bengals are going to look like as we get close to the end of the season this week when they play the Titans.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like this Cincinnati Bengals team, they struggle in the early stages of the season, and then they only get better and better and better and better. And with Joe Burrow seemingly getting healthier and healthier, last week that was the best he looked all season. He didn't look amazing, but that was the best that he had looked. And I agree with you. I think the Bengals are going to walk into Tennessee. They're going, this is our statement game to remind everyone in the NFL. It's like, hey, we might have had our rough start here, but we back, baby. And I think they're going to walk out there. The over-under for total points in this game is 41. I think the Bengals, they might be looking at that going like, you know what? We might just casually just hit that ourselves. And again, probably unlikely, but I think this is going to be a very big game for the Bengals.
Yeah, they still have to be careful and manage the game well, though, because,
Yes.
Joe Burrow is not 100%. Like, if you come out in the first quarter and you take off and you've got that lead, then you put the game in Joe Mixon's hands.
Yes.
I don't care if you start going 3-and-out, 3-and-out. If your defense is holding up and keeping the Titans from scoring, don't put Joe Burrow in situations where he can tweak that injury.
Yeah, you don't want
Because
him getting re-hurt or getting...
no, you need to manage your quarterback properly at this point. This is one of the things the Cincinnati Bengals franchise has not done well over the last couple of decades, is manage their quarterbacks well. And so hopefully they've learned, they paid him big. They're like, okay, we got to keep him healthy. So I think this will be their statement game, but they still have to be careful. They're still in dangerous territory where you lose Joe Burrow, your season's done.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. But now moving over to the Rams and Colts, and this is another one of those tougher games because realistically speaking, looking at the Colts right now and saying they're 2-1, if you would have told me the Colts were going to be 2-1 heading into this week, I would have probably looked at you and went, you probably maybe flip those numbers around and say they're 1-2. And maybe that's the conversation, but they have been a better team this year, and Anthony Richardson is going to be playing. And when we've seen Anthony Richard play, he has been lighting it up. He has been phenomenal to watch. However, I think the Rams, even though they have kind of struggled this year, they have been playing some good games out there. Obviously, winning against the Seahawks in Week 1, which I think shocked the NFL. And I think they're probably going to... I think they're going to come out and win this game this week. And obviously going into Indianapolis, I think Aaron Donald is going to have himself a pretty big game against a running quarterback in Anthony Richardson, who is still pretty green. And, Zach Moss has been fairly good, but... this was also a fairly tough game for me, but I am indeed picking the Rams.
Yeah, and that last point you made there, Aaron Donald feasts on rookie quarterbacks. And I think that is going to be the determining factor this week because he's playing, but he's already had some minor injury issues. So like one big hit from Aaron Donald could finish his day. Granted, they've got what's his name as backup who's been serviceable.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's been doing well.
Uncle Rico.
And yeah, this Colts team does look better than I think any of us anticipated. But even last week, that was a game that the Ravens kind of handed to them, that win.
Yeah.
And I don't think the Rams are going to do the same thing this week just because they also lost a tough game against the Bengals on Monday night. They need a bounce back. And I think the fact that they're going to be getting to play indoors is going to bode well for Matt Stafford. He's familiar with that. We're going to see him put up some good numbers. And Aaron Donald is going to shut down that Colts offense, I think. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but I do think the Rams will win without a whole lot of end-of-game drama happening.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be one of the more boring games, if I had to say, to watch this week, just because it's going to be one of those ones where you have two teams that really at the moment really don't know their identity and are still trying to find it. One team that had a former identity that has been kind of changed here at the moment, and one that's starting on this new path, and it's going to be interesting. But now we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the New Orleans Saints.
So this game for me was my big flip-flop game. Because we talked about at the beginning of the year, the Saints had a nice, easy schedule, but they have not been living up to the hype. The defense hasn't been getting it done, and the offense has not been clicking. And now they've got to make that switch at quarterback to Jameis Winston, who didn't look accurate last week. He looked like he was not prepared to come in and play quarterback.
No.
That being said, with a week's practice, perhaps we do see a little bit more of that Jameis Winston of old, especially going up against the team who drafted him and abandoned him. He might have a bit of a chip on his shoulder and looking to go out there and put up some numbers. And he's got a great cast around him. They also, I believe, are getting Alvin Kamara back this week, are they not?
They are.
So
indeed.
that just adds an additional weapon to the mix. That's why it made it so tough for me because, the Bucs have looked, while not great, they've looked complete. The defense is holding up. The offense has some weapons. They're making plays. Baker Mayfield is, looking like a quarterback that's come into a system that is
really works
catering
for him.
to him.
Yeah.
It's built for him, and he is showcasing his talents, and he is using everything he's got.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be another big game for Mike Evans. I think he's going to bust out and put up probably 150 yards maybe. And ultimately, I just don't think the Saints are going to be able to keep pace. That's going to be the problem. Like, if this gets over, 30 points combined, then it's going to be the Bucs running away with it. The Saints defense has to keep Mike Evans in check in order to win this game, and I just don't think they're going to be able to, and the Bucs will win.
I think the Saints offense has been clicking a little bit better than what you think it has been. Derek Carr has come in and done some pretty good things. Obviously, he's questionable right now, and it's likely going to be what is called the game time decision for him. If Derek Carr is out there, I think it's an easy Saints win, just because I trust that Saints defense against Baker Mayfield.
With Poopy Pants Carr in there when he's already hurt?
True, but I trust him more than I trust Jameis Winston. And this Saints defense, man, has been really good all year long. And I think the only reason that the Saints aren't 3-0 was because Poopy Pants Derek Carr ended up getting hurt. And, Jameis Winston, again, going back to what you're saying, looked so ill prepared in that game. It's like he was focusing more on crab legs than he was on actually what the game upcoming, and now he's been kind of the guy most of the week. I still think the Saints are going to win this one just because I trust their defense a lot more than I do the Bucs offense. And again, we've seen Baker Mayfield when he goes up against some really good defenses struggle And
Mhm.
again, if Derek Carr is in there, I know we always like to joke about him, Mr. Poopy Pants, and every single time any sort of pressure comes his way, we can hear him screaming, not through our televisions, but just hit how loud it is going over across the country. But I still have the Saints right now, just 'cause, again, that defense is for real, and I think they will be able to do a little bit more. And if Derek Carr doesn't play, then it's probably going to be a lot closer, and we'll see how Jameis Winston does. But for me, yeah, I just have the Saints because I trust that defense.
That's fair. Like I said, this was a flip flop for me all week, trying to figure out which one I wanted to go with, and it came down to a hurt Carr or a Jameis Winston with only a week's prep. I don't have enough faith in either of them to put up enough points to win. This Saints defense is going to be good. They might be able to hold the Bucks to only 10 points or 13 points, but I don't know if their offense is going to be able to score more than that. That is where my concern is. I feel like this is going to be a really low scoring game.
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be fairly low scoring as well, but it's going to be interesting nonetheless. So now we're moving over the Commanders going into Philadelphia and Lincoln Financial Field, and taking on the Eagles. And last week, the Eagles started to look like they were getting their offense a little bit more to where they want to be, and I honestly still think that this Eagles team, they're still figuring out their passing game a little bit here at the moment, but that
Mm-hmm.
running game right now with DeAndre Swift, man, like I don't know how any team's gonna stop that. That old line is just saying, you know what, we're gonna open up like the Red Sea here and just give you heavens worth of space, and Smith or Swift is going, please, like, to me, this is the Kelsey Swift matchup duo that I like to see.
Yeah.
Like, it has been just nothing but magic watching those, like, that offensive line and what Swift is doing. And I think they're just going to run over the Commanders, and it's not going to be a game.
No. No, and it's going to happen on both sides of the ball. After seeing what Sam Howell did week against the Bills, this Eagles defense is way better. This secondary is looking at Sam Howell going, wow, you gave up 4 picks to the Bills. Let's go and get 8.
Yeah.
It's going to be an ugly game for the Commanders. Um, it's unfortunate because they have looked better this year. You can see the pieces that they've been putting together. It's coming together, but there's almost no team in the NFL that's as complete as the Eagles, and they've been looking better and better every week. You
Yes.
can see them getting that chemistry together and working out the kinks and going, okay, we're getting almost back to that Super Bowl form, or they're gearing up for the 49ers later in the season, is what it feels like. And this week it's going to be huge for the Eagles defense, and it's going to be huge for DeAndre Swift, because really, once you start running away with it, you don't need to throw the ball. That being said, Jalen Hurts is still going to. You got Devonta Parker and was that it? And AJ Brown out there, and you're going to put up some good numbers.
Yeah.
It's going to be such a blowout of a game. This one will be fun to watch in terms of seeing a team get blown out, but it's going to be boring because there's going to be no competition.
Oh, without a doubt. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, this is just going to be one of those games. But now transitioning into what people are calling probably the second worst game of the week, where we have two 0-3 teams competing. The Vikings go into Charlotte and take on the Panthers. And personally, let's go Vikings, let's go Vikings, because the Bears have the Panthers #1 pick, and right now the Bears are genuinely looking like they could end up with pick 1 and 2, and I'm sitting back going like, oh yes, give us a quarterback in Marvin Harrison Jr., please, oh my god. It's the Vikings being 0-3 right now. Like last year they were 13-0 in one score games, and currently they're 0-3 in one score games. But the Vikings and Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, they are doing something right now where they are on pace to shatter records.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Jefferson has not had a game where he's been under 140 yards. Last week he got 149, so I can't say he hasn't had a game under 150, but it's basically 150 yards per game. And who do the Panthers have to stop Justin Jefferson? They got no one.
No, they really don't. And as I mentioned earlier, the Vikings are the best 0-3 team we have right now.
Without a doubt.
It's been a lot of tight games for them. Unfortunately, we've seen it over the last 3 years. The Vikings went from being this powerhouse who was always talked about as being maybe one of the teams on the precipice of a great Super Bowl run, and every year one of their big talents walks away. They lose a big talent every year. They lost it was Dalvin Cook this year who ended up walking, and it's just
Well, they cut him.
that's when and it feels like they shot themselves in the foot by doing it. Because you turned yourself into a one-dimensional offense. That's why Justin Jefferson's getting so many yards, because he's the only guy that's doing anything.
And then you
outside
draft
of
a guy in Jordan Addison who kind of almost feels like they were drafting Jordan Addison to go, okay, there's a good chance that we might just have to trade away Jordan or Justin Jefferson. We're gonna get a stupid amount of picks, and so we just kind of need to prepare for the future in drafting Addison. Like, that's kind of what it feels like at the moment.
Yeah, and it's just they're the best 0-3 team, and they're going to get their first win because they are going up against the Panthers team that has not looked good yet this year.
No, and Bryce Young is healthy and going to be starting again, and Bryce Young has looked horrible this year.
I mean, he looks like a tiny quarterback looks, unless you've got an offensive line that's going to, protect you to the point where you can run for over 100 yards a game as the quarterback, you're not going to be able to pull out much, Dude looks like a 12-year-old playing with men. It's unfortunate. They don't have anything that makes me want to pick them. Whereas the Vikings, I think they're due their first win finally. I don't think this is going to turn around for them. It's the Vikings and the Bears fighting for last place in the NFC North. And
don't worry, Viking fans, we got this. Yeah. We'll take that spot.
Yeah, I mean, unless they start flexing Kirk Cousins to primetime more often, then they're going to start racking up more losses. But this is going to be a dull game. I probably won't even flip to this one at any point in time because I don't even think I have any players on these two teams for my fantasy. So I'm like, eh.
This is a very who cares type of game. The only reason that I have any stake in this game is just because I want to see the Panthers lose.
Yeah.
And
you're playing for 2 top 5 picks at this point.
I'm playing for 2 top 3 picks.
Top 3. Yeah.
And let alone 2 top 5s. But yeah, we're both picking the Vikings on this one. Now heading into your game this week where the Pittsburgh Steelers, after coming off of a pretty decent win against the Raiders, take on kind of almost a shockingly decent Texans team.
I mean, they had one good week. They shocked the Jags last week. I don't know if they're going to be able to string that together multiple weeks in a row. Whereas looking at my Pittsburgh Steelers, week 1 was garbage. They got some things going in week 2, improved the defense, improved the special teams. Last week, the offense got rolling a little bit at times. The run game is still a little suspect, but I mean, we saw some flashes from Najee Harris. I think we're seeing Matt Canada get the talking to from the fans, from Mike Tomlin, from the Rooney family going, stop with your little trick plays. Because all it's doing is it's confusing the O-line. It's confusing your own players more than the defense like you're hoping it would. And so we see when he starts calling back-to-back plays of more conventional style, that's when Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren are able to start getting positive yards. Because the offensive linemen are literally just standing up and block the guy in front of you. There's none of these slides and shunts over to the sides trying to block tight or block the edge rushers. None of that. Is just straightforward, run it downhill. And we Najee Harris started getting a couple last week. I think if they keep doing that, there's no reason to think he won't be able to bounce back into that top 10 rushing category. Right now he's not looking like it. He's a liability at this point, but he's still got the talent. Like he looks slow, but it's those slow runs where he's busting it for 20 yards magically, and it's confusing because everybody's like, oh man, he looks like he's lugging along there. It's like, yeah, but he just ran for 17 yards. So yeah, it looked slow, but nobody could catch him somehow. So I don't know. This team's look better every week. I'm happy with what's happening. If Matt Canada can keep calling proper plays, we've seen him start to throw it downfield. He's been using Freiermuth in the game. It's looking good. We're on the upswing, and I don't think the Texans will string together 2 wins. The Steelers are going to go in, and we know how this Steelers defense loves playing against rookie quarterbacks, especially running rookie quarterbacks like C.J. Stroud. And so
C.J. Stroud's not a running quarterback.
I mean, he's an Ohio State quarterback. He's a running
quarterback. He's not a running quarterback. He never was. He is more of a pocket passer than runner.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
that's just a straight up fact. He's more pocket passer than runner. C.J. Stroud did not run at all at Ohio State.
Either way, they're gonna get after him. They like playing the rookie quarterbacks. T.J. Watt is right on the precipice of being officially a 1 sack per game player in his career. He only needs a few more games where he's putting up 2, 3, or 4 in a game, and I think he's gonna put up 2 or 3 this week for sure.
Yeah. For me, if the Texans' O-line was healthier than what it was right now, because they have a lot of guys out currently on their O-line, I would say this game is going to be a lot closer than what most people think it's going to be, because C.J. Stroud has looked like an absolute dog. He looks phenomenal, and that's a reason why I said he was the number 1 quarterback in this draft class. Is he is a lot better than what people are giving him credit for, including yourself. I do think the Steelers are going to win this game just solely because that defense is just so good. At this point, Najee Harris does not deserve to be the number 1 running back, and Jaylen Warren, whenever he is in, he is without a doubt been a better player. He's giving more spark to the offense. I don't see Najee Harris bouncing back. He looks so slow, and yeah, there's plays where when he looks slow and he's still getting by everyone. There's 3 times more plays where he runs the ball and he looks so slow, and it looks like he just gets caught, and it's like, dude, like obviously, like you were like coming out of Alabama, you weren't the fastest guy. We knew you weren't the fastest guy, but you were trucking over guys, and he's not doing that. Like he just doesn't look like he has it. And every single time I see Jaylen Warren out there, whether he's rushing the ball or getting the ball out of the backfield, he's looking phenomenal. Kenny Pickett has still struggled a lot this year, and I think this Texans defense is better than what a lot of people are giving them credit for, and I think the Steelers offense is probably going to struggle. This is going to be a close game. I think this is going to be a lot closer than what people expect, and ultimately it's going to be the Steelers defense winning them the game.
Yeah, well, and I mean that is Steelers football. That is exactly what Terrell Austin's trying to set up. Get the opposing team into 2nd and long, 3rd and longs, and try and turn the ball over. That's the goal. And I don't think the Steelers offense is going to struggle as much as they did at the start of the season. Like I said, they've improved every week so far. They've given me no reason to think they're going to regress against a team who is significantly worse than any team they've played so far.
Yeah, granted, I am picking the Steelers to win this game, but I think this is going to be a lot closer than what you expect.
Yeah, see, and I think it's going to start out close, but I think the second half is where it's going to get away from the Texans, and we're going to end up seeing a double-digit difference by the end of the game. At halftime, I expect it to be tied, probably somewhere around 10 each, 13 each, and then that's where the defense and the offense will shift and take over in the second half.
This is one of those games where after, like, if you were to sit me down, like if future me were to come back and say, like, listen, the Steelers are going to end up losing this game, I would kind of look at this point and go, I don't see it, but it wouldn't shock me.
No, I mean there's flashes on that Texans team for sure. You got to remember they had 2 of the top picks this year, so they've got some talent there. I just don't think they're complete enough to put it all together. And as you said, with that offensive line hurting, and they've got a weak link in there as well in Kendrick Green, who I was always very high on. I was surprised the Steelers cut him, but unfortunately, he's going up against a bunch of guys who practiced against him for almost 2 years, and so they know his weak points. And I think CJ Stroud is going to be running around a lot trying to get away from this defense.
It's going to be interesting to say the least, but now moving over into a pretty decent looking game on paper where we have the Raiders taking on the Chargers. And speaking of Raiders, they've officially cut Chandler Jones at this point after what has just been an absolute, like, who knows what's happening with him and that organization. But this should be a fairly interesting game to watch because the Chargers have not looked good this year. They were able to get their first win against the Vikings last week in kind of that game where it just went back and forth, but honestly, the Chargers really shouldn't have won that game. Brandon Staley, again, the biggest criticism that we've always said about him is that he just makes some of these bonehead decisions where it's like, yeah, we're going to go for it on 4th and 2 on our own 20-yard line because the analytics say that it's likely that we can get a 4th and 2, and it's like, dude, like, there's been a lot of times where this has bitten you in the ass. And you are lucky enough that your defense was able to hold on to keep you guys in that game. It's like, my man, like, punt the ball in that situation. But with this being said, they are facing the Raiders, and the Raiders right now are so dysfunctional. Like, it's clear Davante Adams doesn't want to be there. You know, Jimmy Garoppolo is at best, which is not saying much.
Yeah, he didn't look good last week.
No, he didn't. And, you know, this Chargers team with Justin Herbert, like, Justin Herbert is always going to be able to do stuff. It's really just, for me, this Chargers defense. Can they do enough to stop this Raiders offense? And right now, pretty much the only player on that Raiders offense who's doing anything is Davante Adams. Obviously, he had a massive game against your Steelers, but I just don't think the Raiders are going to be able to do enough against this Chargers team, and I have the Chargers.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what it is. Like, yeah, the Chargers didn't deserve to win last week, but neither did the Vikings. You know, and that's the tough thing. And then you go back, and the Chargers were competitive with the Dolphins, you know, keeping pace with them. And prior to this week, I didn't have concerns with the Chargers offense. The issue now is the injuries are mounting. You know, Austin Eckler's down. They just lost Mike Williams. It's getting dicey in LA, unfortunately, for that offense. So can they keep putting up these numbers?
Yep.
That's going to be the question mark. The defense is suspect. They keep giving up lots, so I expect Davante Adams to have another big day. It's who's going to outperform who? Is it going to be Keenan Allen or is it going to be Davante Adams? Is what it's going to come down to in this game. Yep. And I just don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is capable of making the right decisions all the way through the game in the same way that Justin Herbert is. And so I think that's what it's going to come down to. Herbert is going to be a little bit more careful and precise and be able to pull out this win rather than the Raiders being able to do anything. I think the Chargers will ultimately run away with this. The Raiders, I feel like they're capped at about that 22 to 25 point range, whereas the Chargers are putting up consistently over
more
30.
than that, yeah.
Yeah.
Now going over to the Patriots and Cowboys.
Man, the Cowboys got just embarrassed last week by the Cardinals, didn't they?
We love to see it.
None of us expected it. I mean, I knew it was going to happen eventually.
Yes.
You know, the Cowboys are never dem boys. It hasn't been that way since the early 90s, and it's not going to change now. That being said, I think they're going to have a bit of a bounce back statement week this week. You know, that their defense was a little bit in disarray last week. You know, losing, what was it, Gilmore they lost
Yeah.
last week?
Oh,
Yeah,
Trayvon
and
Diggs.
so
Trayvon Diggs.
it was Diggs they lost. Yeah, and so it was. It felt like they just hadn't figured out how to fill those holes properly.
Hmm.
That's not going to happen again this week. They're going to feast on Mac Jones and this Patriots offense, and they're going to have a bounce back and say, no, no, last week was an anomaly. We are still one of the best defenses in the league. You know, Dak Prescott is going to do Dak Prescott things and question whether they're going to win the game. But ultimately, I do think they will bounce back and win this game against the Patriots.
Yeah, Mac Jones has definitely looked better this year with an actual offensive coordinator calling the plays, but he still hasn't looked that good, to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest. And Dak Prescott, last week we saw the exact type of Dak Prescott that we thought we were gonna watch, and I think that Cardinals, like that was a trap game last week. That was one of
Mm-hmm.
those things where it was the Cowboys going up against the 0-2 Cardinals, who are looked at as one of the worst teams in the NFL. Blah blah blah, all this and that, and it almost felt like the Cowboys were like, it's just the Cardinals. We'll blow through these guys. We can do this on autopilot, and then like that's the definition of the trap game. And the Cowboys, they got a rude awakening call, and
Yep. They
you,
fell into that trap.
they did. And you and I often look at this team and go, for me, it's Mike McCarthy. I don't think Mike McCarthy is good enough of a coach to take this team that is very talented to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
I think if they had a better coach in there, we might have a different conversation. But I still have worries with Dak Prescott. But ultimately, I think this is probably going to be a decently close game. They have it as Dallas as 6-point favorites in this one. I think it's probably not going to hit a 6-point advantage, but I think the Cowboys defense is going to bounce back, have a pretty good week against Mac Jones. Micah Parsons, he's going to look at Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Jonesies and say, no, 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 I'm your daddy, and he's going to put up a performance, and it's not. But that offense, I struggle with Dak.
See, and that's my issue too. You know, this was a game where I wasn't entirely sure on as well. I had a hard time picking the Cowboys to lose 2 weeks in a row. And the thing that I think is going to make the difference here is going to be that coaching. You got to remember, it's Bill Belichick on the other side.
It is.
And watch that film and gone, okay, so the Cardinals beat them by running James Conner down their throat.
Mm-hmm.
We got Zeke.
Mm-hmm. Who has looked kind of more onto Zeke's form, and Zeke wants to go up against his old team and show out big.
And I think that's going to be what decides it. Can Ezekiel Elliott run the same way this week as the Cardinals did last week when Micah Parsons is going to be targeting in on him? I don't think Micah Parsons is going to be looking at Mac Jones going, I'm going to feast on you. I think he's going to be looking at Ezekiel Elliott and going, you're not getting anywhere near 50 yards this week.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. But now going to the next game, and unfortunately, the 49ers, we could say this is a trap game against the Cardinals, but the 49ers, to me, I just think they look at every single opponent like it's a Super Bowl opponent, because Kyle Shanahan just has that mentality of just like, we are not overlooking you. And I think the 49ers are going to come out. They are going to they're gonna look at the Cardinals and say, there's a reason that people say that you're one of the worst teams in the league, and we're gonna show you. And Brock Purdy is probably gonna have a pretty good day.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't, much like I said earlier with that Steelers-Texans game, I don't see the Cardinals pulling off 2 upsets in a row.
Yeah.
You know, like it's against 2 of the best defenses in the league. It's just not going to happen. You know, the Niners likely looked at that and they went, okay, so we just have to neutralize James Conner, and they have one of the best rush defenses in the league. They're going to be able to do that easily.
Yeah.
The concern with the 49ers that I have is the same as my concern with the Chargers. They're starting to get banged up on offense. They're starting to lose wide receivers. I believe they're all in this week, but we've seen Ayuk miss a game now. We've seen Deebo Samuel fighting with some injuries and be on the injury report. I think they're all playing this week.
So looking at the injury report right now, they have no one listed as out. Deebo Samuel is questionable. Jawan Jennings is questionable. Elijah Mitchell is questionable, but no one has been labeled as out currently at the moment. So
that is where my
They
Well,
have
but
Christian McCaffrey, and
they do.
they can just easily just run the ball down.
They can, but Christian McCaffrey historically has been injury prone as well. So that's what I mean where that's my concern is they need to start playing a little smarter and protecting their players a little better because you lose Ayuk and then Samuel, you've got Kittle and CMC. Great.
Mm-hmm.
But both of those guys have had injury problems as well. And that is where the 49ers are going to have some longevity issues going through. Can they stay healthy enough that they have this explosive offense all year? And I think this game, they should be fine, but it's these types of games where you see those freak injuries happen, those bizarre plays where a guy just takes a tackle the wrong way and all of a sudden his season's over. And the 49ers have to avoid that, even though if that happens, they're still going to win the season.
Yep.
The 49ers win this hands down. But that is the trap they need to avoid is the injuries on offense because it's already starting to mount a little bit for them, and that will come back to bite them at the end of the year if they're not careful.
It's hard to not think that. But now moving over to Sunday Night Football, which on the schedule when the season came out, we were all sitting back going like, this gonna be a game.
Right? We were finally going to get Pat Mahomes against fucking Aaron Rodgers.
And now we're sitting back going like, fuck! Like,
right?
Really, are we having to watch this? Because Zach Wilson, and again, I give a lot of credit to Robert Saleh for looking at the situation that has happened, and he has taken it on the chin, and every week he's going, no, Zach Wilson's our guy, we have trust in this, and that. But man, Zach Wilson looks fucking horrible, man. Like, he just looks so bad, and the Chiefs last week, they were able to get a big win, and they looked like the Chiefs of old where their defense was firing on all cylinders. Granted, it was against the Bears, and their offense couldn't be stopped against the Bears. But again, that's the game that they needed. They needed that confidence booster. It's kind of like what we're saying about the Jags, where they just need a game just to get that confidence back. And once they do, the Jets have a great defense. I think they're probably gonna hold Mahomes and the Chiefs offense to probably close to under 25 points, but the Jets offense going up against that Chiefs defense, it might be 25-0 when it's all said and done. Like, Zach Wilson is just not going to be able to do anything against this Chiefs offense. Breece Hall hasn't looked amazing other than that week one, and everyone else just seemingly isn't able to get anything done. And yeah, for me, this is an easy Chiefs win.
I agree. Yeah, the easy Chiefs win for sure. I think you're right around that 25-point mark. The Jets scoring 0 is believable unless Cook or Hall manage to break out. And I really feel like that's what the Jets need to do is they need to shift their personality away from, superstar quarterback to we've got this two-headed monster at running back. We're going to run the ball down your throat. We're going to play old school football because that's the thing. That Chiefs defense has looked a little weaker against the run too. And so if they can call the game right, they might be able to stay in this till near the end of the game. We said we were going to talk about it later. From what I hear, MetLife Stadium is going to be fucking full of Swifties. And so that's going to be a little bit ridiculous. We'll see if she shows up as well to support Travis Kelce and if that's all we get to see on our screen again. But this will be an easy Chiefs win. The Jets, I mean, they're the Jets. They're doing Jet things.
The Jets, yeah.
Right? But, we might see... We have to see something big out of Breece Hall or Dalvin Cook. That is the only way the Jets are going to be competitive.
Yeah, without a doubt. And now moving into the Monday night contest where we have the Seattle Seahawks heading into MetLife after what we saw the Kansas City Chiefs do against the Jets. They're taking on the Giants in this one, and to me, the Seahawks are going to walk in there and they're going to beat up on the Giants. Like, I don't have faith in Daniel Jones. I said this when they signed him to that contract. I said, this is going to debilitate your team. You should have signed Saquon Barkley. Granted, he's coming off of a little bit of an injury. He's questionable for the game, but even if they do have him in there, I think the Seattle Seahawks, as they're probably not going to blow them out of the water, they're gonna I think easily win this game.
Yeah, it's not going to be like a 40-0 game like the opening week was, but I do really see the Seahawks putting up 25-30 on this Giants team that I don't see scoring more than 12.
Yeah.
It's still going to be fairly one-sided. Not sure what's up with the NFL this year. They're really hard on for this MetLife Stadium doing Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football back to back. It's, even though both of these teams are kind of dog shit, I would have rather see Bills and Dolphins in this window, or
it would have been so much better,
right? Like there were other options they could have put here for sure. But yeah, the Seahawks are going to win this easily. They've started to gel a little bit more, look a little bit more like they did last year. I'm still waiting for this big breakout from this wide receiver duo.
It has to come sooner or later.
It has to come eventually, man. And when it does, if they're able to maintain it, this team is going to become exciting to watch on offense.
Without a doubt. And now moving over to our Thursday night game, where I get to then again talk about my Bears. Again, I think they're taking on the Commanders in the Thursday night game. Talk about flex that game out. Put them on Wednesday morning. No one cares. No one wants to watch the Bears play, and it's particularly primetime football. But I think the Bears, like I said, they're going to lose against the Broncos. They're going to lose quite badly to the Broncos. And I think the organization is going to sit down and say to Matt Eberflus, listen, you're fired, but you're coaching the game against the Commanders because we can't fire you and not have an interim coach come in for a Thursday night game. It's going to be like, listen, like we're not going to announce anything, but you lose against the Broncos, we're gonna let you go and then move forward after that game. And this Commanders team has looked a lot better this year, and they're gonna come out, and I think they're going to, at home in FedEx Field with Irvin Magic Johnson as their new ownership, they're gonna say we're gonna beat down this Chicago team. And
yeah, I think this will be the bounce back for the Commanders. They started 2-0. They were looking good, and then they had a rough week last week against the Bills. They're going to have another rough week this week going up against the Eagles. But then they go back to playing a bit of a softer team, and it'll be the confidence boost that Sam Howell needs, because he'll be able to start moving the ball again, getting Dotson and McLaurin involved in the game more. And yeah, I do agree this will be a bit of an embarrassing loss for the Bears to the Commanders.
And at this point, I don't even think it's necessarily embarrassing. It's just expected, honestly, at this point. And
I mean, it's expected, but it's still embarrassing.
Yeah,
but the Commanders.
Yeah, fair enough. But now moving over to our top 5 best teams in the NFL and bottom 5 teams in the NFL. Now, do you want to start with our top 5 or bottom 5?
Well, let's do our bottoms first. Get the bottoms out of the way here. And we talked a little bit throughout the week because we saw a couple upsets from these bottom teams, and we speculated that maybe we'd see some shifts. For myself, there's a shift in the order, but I still have the same 5 teams in my bottom 5, unfortunately. Like, I didn't see enough for those teams that got their upset to claw their way all the way out, but they reached the top of my bottom 5. So now I do have the Cardinals sitting at 28. They're just on the precipice. They get another win, maybe they'll be able to vault themselves out of there. That's not going to happen. And then right below them, I have the Texans sitting at 29, the Panthers sitting at number 30, because I could not put the Broncos anywhere any better than second last after letting 70 points up against them last week. And then, the Bears let the Chiefs put up an easy 40 spot on them. I think if the Chiefs had wanted to last week, they could have looked at that and gone, you guys put up 70 over there in Miami? We're 70. I really think they easily could have scored over 70 points against that Bears team. And so that is why the Bears are still deadline for me.
Yeah, and for me, I do have a new team in my bottom five. So at my fifth worst team in the NFL right now, I have the Cardinals. Um, I beating the Cowboys was a big win, and you know what? I've said this pretty much each week. The Cardinals have surprised me more and more each week with actually how much more consistent they have been this year, and they've looked pretty decent, like as decent as a 1-2 team that realistically should be 0-3 team could be. Um, I think this Cardinals team is is probably going to be a lot better than what we initially thought at the beginning of the year. My next team at number 4, my fourth worst team in the NFL, that has to be the Tennessee Titans. They have a win, but this team they look, I just don't really know how to describe it, but they look visionless. They just have a team that just looks lost. Ryan Tannehill technically right now is the 33rd ranked quarterback in fantasy after Miami Dolphins quarterback, their backup, went in there and, it became the 32nd, which is hilarious to think about. But yeah, I just don't really like this Tennessee Titans team right now. I don't really have a lot of faith in them. So that's why I have them in my number 4 spot for the fourth worst team in the NFL. Number 3, again, same with you. It is the Carolina Panthers. This team is, even with Bryce Young out there, they look bad. Um, we kind of expected this from the Panthers. We thought they were going to have some early struggles with Bryce Young, but Bryce Young really hasn't adjusted. And going back to what you said earlier, it looks like a 12-year-old playing up against grown men, and that's really what it looks like. And I don't expect the Panthers to be a lot better moving forward. But yeah, my number 2 team, we talked about it at length earlier, but the Broncos, they looked so bad, and the only reason that they're not number 1 is because my number 1 team in the Chicago Bears just somehow looks even worse. Like
Yep.
And it's so difficult to just really say much more than that. But I do have the
Well,
Texans escaping the bottom 5 just because, you know what CJ Stroud is doing, man. Like, he looks really, really good. And he just doesn't have the team around him yet, but I think if this Texans team can continue to build, they could be very dangerous with CJ Stroud.
yeah, we did talk about that. They just need really one more good draft there, and maybe grab a free agent or two, and they will be competing for sure. And it's funny, we have our bottom 2 teams facing off against each other this week, but these 2 teams are so bad
That they're not
that
going to
I'm
change.
yeah, I'm comfortable in saying that next week, even if my prediction's right and the Bears win, I'm still going to have the Broncos and the Bears at 31 and 32 ranked in this league.
Hmm. Yeah, it'd be hard to not have those two now,
Right?
because yeah, it's literally like two toddlers who are angry going up against each other. It's like, yeah, they're not going to be able to fight a teenager, but they're gonna, like, which toddler is gonna be able to beat up the other toddler? It's like, okay,
I
well,
mean, I'd probably be more entertained watching 2 toddlers fist fight than watching these 2 teams play.
yeah, me too. Yeah,
Right?
honestly.
Like, oh,
Let's get Cartman out there and get the league back going.
yeah.
But yeah, now moving over to your top 5 teams in the NFL. If I remember correctly, when we were talking before, you had the exact same 5. I know I have one more new team in this list.
No, I do have one new team here as well, but for the most part, it is staying pretty similar to what it was last week. The Cowboys had their 1 week in the top 5 for me. I said last week I didn't expect them to stay very long. I didn't expect them to lose to the Cardinals and be out this quick, but they have dropped out of my top 5. And moving into that spot at 5, it was tough because there's a couple of teams that are looking right on the precipice. But ultimately, the Bills looked complete last week, so I am going to let them into that number 5 spot for now. We'll see how this Dolphins game goes and how the rest of these 2-1 teams perform this week. I don't know if they'll still be there next week. After that, I have flipped my number 4 and my number 3 team. So I do have the Chiefs sitting at number 4 now, even though they handled the Bears very well last week. The Dolphins just they have to move up that list for me. Now are sitting at number 3 after putting up a 70 spot. And my 1 and 2 stay exactly where they were, with the Eagles sitting at number 2 for me and the 49ers as the number 1 team, because they're just they haven't shown me that they don't deserve it.
Yep, without a doubt. And you and me have the exact same 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 actually. Yeah, right now, looking at the Dolphins, they have looked more impressive than the Chiefs, and they've had to go up against a lot tougher opponents, and they have handled it. And the Chiefs, again, they looked really good this week, but it was against a toddler. It was against a drunk toddler who they beat up against. And so that, to me, that's not saying much, doing what they did against that. And yeah, sure, well, we can say that, oh, the Dolphins did the exact same thing against the Broncos, but they've had to go out and deal with some tougher teams. And that week 1 game against the Chargers, that was not an easy win. And my number 5 spot is actually the team that beat the Chiefs, in that being the Detroit Lions. And granted, they did have that loss against Seattle, but right now they handled Atlanta. They made it look easy. They handled Green Bay, and they made that look easy. And this team is only getting better and better and better and better. And for me, it was going to be, the real test was going up against Green Bay. And if they could go into Lambeau and win that game and win it handily, there's no reason I can't say they're a top 5 team. You look at the Bills. Who are the last 2 teams that they went up against? They lost, or they beat the Raiders, who aren't a great team. They beat the Commanders, who aren't a great team. They lost to the Jets, who after 4 plays no longer had Aaron Rodgers. So, and now they're going up against Miami. For me, this is going to be the pivotal point. If the Bills can win this, then they're guaranteed in my top 5 next week. But if they lose it, it's one of those things like, okay, you beat 2 bad teams. You were supposed to beat those teams. So I can't put them in my top 5 yet, just because they haven't proven to me yet that they've done anything. And again, like, I look at the Chiefs right now and go, okay, who are the 2 teams that you beat? You beat Jacksonville in a really grindy type of a game, and then you beat the Bears. So right now, I'm still sitting back going like, okay, like, you really haven't proven enough to me yet, but you're still the Kansas City Chiefs, and you have Patrick Mahomes, so you're kind of getting that a little bit right now. But yeah, for me, those are my top 5.
Yeah, and I mean, the Lions were right there for me. The only reason they didn't make my top 5 is because I was not including that Packers game in it.
Okay.
I'm sort of going off of the week 3 finish, and that is why they're not quite there, and that's why I'm waiting to see this Dolphins game. Unless another team does phenomenally well this week to make me think they're better than the Lions, I fully expect the Detroit Lions to be my number 5 team next week. That the only reason they didn't make it is because I was trying to put that Packers game out of my mind, because they've got that 1 extra game right now, and I'm like, I don't want to.
You don't want to have
give them that
bias.
advantage.
Yeah, no,
And so
I hear you.
That was the only reason that they're sitting at 6 behind the Bills for me at this point. But I agree, the Lions are one of the hottest commodities right now in the NFL, and they're dangerous.
Yep.
They look like they may be the team to beat in the AFC North for the next couple of years if Dan Campbell can keep this squad together and keep making Jared Goff look like the quarterback I thought he was when he got drafted years ago.
Yeah.
Jared Goff for me was a top tier quarterback when he came into the league, and I was hyped on him, and I just felt like Sean McVay didn't utilize him properly.
And I love Ben Johnson as their offensive coordinator. I love Ben Johnson so much to the point I'm like, Bears, go out there, hire this fucking guy, get him away from Detroit, and maybe, just maybe, if you hire Ben Johnson, he can talk to Caleb Williams and go, listen, that was the old shit. We got the number
Mhm.
1 and we got the number 2 pick. So you, Mr. Caleb Williams, you tell me who you want us to draft at pick number 2. Is it the tackle out of Penn State, or is it possibly the greatest wide receiver coming out of the draft in many, many years in Mr. Marvin Harrison? We got DJ Moore as well, who isn't a slouch at that wide receiver position. Imagine coming into the league and having Marvin Harrison and DJ Moore. Ooh, good things happen. We do good. Just basically go caveman speak. And I hope the Bears get Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator. And Ben Johnson has done magical things with Jared Goff. But yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what continues to happen throughout the NFL. And again, I understand what you're saying. You don't want to use that recency bias, but for me, that game against Atlanta, like Atlanta at that point was a perfect 2-0. Like
Yep.
they were looking much better, and they took Desmond Ridder and they said, "Sit down, stop. You ain't that guy, kid." And they went out there and they controlled the game. They handled it perfectly. And again, that recency bias of what they did against the Packers, it was like, man.
And that literally is the only reason they're not my number. If I include what happened on Thursday night in my assessment, then the Lions are my number 5 team. I'm just, like I said, I'm trying to keep this at the end of week 3 is where I made my cut, as opposed to that Thursday night game to start week 4. That's the only downside to, with us filming on Saturdays, is trying to figure out where to make our cutoffs on our personal opinion.
Yeah.
Honestly, and that's why picking some of these Thursday night games is always so tough as well, because we're picking teams that are going to be playing tomorrow for us, and then looking at what they're going to be able to do next week. We could see, massive injuries to this Commanders team, and then go, oh, maybe Bears can pull.
Well, and it could also be a situation where the Bears go out there and look like a completely different team, and they decimate the Broncos, and they put up 70 points against that defense. And
Okay, put the crack pipe down.
Yeah, you're right. I should be punished for making that
I'll be
statement.
surprised if the Bears score 70 points over the course of the next 6 weeks.
I'll be surprised if the Bears score 70 points this season.
I didn't want to be that mean. I thought I'd be nicer than that.
Yep. But yeah, again, I can't believe I allowed that statement to come out of my mouth. I feel sick. I feel sick,
Right?
and you know what? I apologize. I would like to make my official Logan Paul apology. You know what? I should have never said that. It was a mistake, and I don't know what got over me, and sorry, to everyone that I offended by making that statement. And Sterling, I appreciate you keeping me grounded and telling me to put down the crack pipe, because
Right? Like, unless we're counting Justin Fields' pick sixes, then maybe they put up 70 points.
yes, yeah.
Well, he still threw a touchdown technically, even though it was for the other team. So we'll count that.
He's actually thrown 2 touchdowns to other teams.
Yep. Do you need to rant about your Bears again this week?
There's nothing to rant about.
Nothing new. It's same shit, different day.
Exactly, and it's after week 1 there was a lot of ranting there. After week 2 there was some good ranting there. After week 3 it's like, what am I gonna say? Oh, coach is bad, players underperform.
Right. That's sort of how I feel. I was very ranty those first couple weeks, but as time's gone by, I'm wanting to rant a little bit less about the Steelers. Matt Canada.
Well, it's like, what can we say that we already haven't said?
Well, exactly. For me, it's actually going the other direction, which is good. Which is it makes me happy. Matt Canada isn't calling as many of those awkward jet sweeps on 2nd and long or 3rd and long. He's not calling constant screenplays. He's throwing the ball downfield to Calvin Austin. He's throwing the ball downfield to George Pickens. It's looking like the offense should look. And more of this is what is going to allow Najee Harris to bounce back, if he's going to at all. I know you don't believe he's going to. I'm a fan.
You have to. You have to.
Exactly. I've got to have that faith, and I've got to look at it in the way of how do we get him going? Not will he, it's how. And getting the passing game going is the key to that, because it's going to cause these defenses to back off. They're not going to be able to load the box with 8 guys, which means they're going to be able to open up some holes for Najee Harris. And we've seen when they're not bringing 8 or 9 guys at the run game, Najee Harris is usually able to make that first guy miss. Even if he happens to be 4 yards behind the line when that first guy gets to him, he's still making him miss. The catch is making sure that that first guy doesn't get to him until he's already beyond the line of scrimmage. If we can do that, then Najee Harris is going to be back to a 4 to 4.5 yards per carry player. And if you're carrying the ball for 4 yards each time, you win the game, because that's a first down every single time. You know, that's 4, 8, 12. That's all you got to do. And if we can get him back to that point, then when we've got the lead, we don't have to worry about, oh, we're going to punt it and then rely on our defense. And honestly, things are trending in the right direction for Pittsburgh if they can keep this going. I still want Matt Canada out. Don't get me wrong. Like, I still don't think he's the guy. There's many other options that are a better fit for the talent and the style of players that we have on offense. But if he can get out of his own way, and, you know, we've seen Kenny Pickett interacting with Ben Roethlisberger a little bit more over the last, 6-7 weeks. Maybe Kenny Pickett needs to start taking some notes from him and go, you know what? That play that Matt Canada called in is not the right one. I'm not gonna run it. Because Ben said that. There were many times Todd Haley, who was a great offensive coordinator, would call plays, and Ben's like, "Nah, man, I've seen what this defense is doing. That's a bad call. I'm just gonna call my own play." And that is what Kenny Pickett needs to do. Put this team on your shoulders. Your accuracy did improve last week. He was more accurate than Jimmy Garoppolo last week.
Yeah,
And
but that's not saying much.
It's a step in the right direction, man. He was more accurate last week than he was the week before, which was more than the week before. At that pace, theory says he should be more accurate this week. And if he keeps making those better decisions, we're going to see more of these games where he's throwing for 1, 2, maybe even 3 touchdowns with 0 interceptions. And that is the key. If he can keep from turning the ball over and move the chains and let the defense get that rest that they need, this team will be unstoppable. Because as I discussed earlier, this is what Terrell Austin wants. The goal is rush on first down. We are trying to get the quarterback on first down or that running back behind the line, because we want them in second and long and third and long situations, because that's when guys like Patrick Peterson and Minkah Fitzpatrick and Levi Wallace and Joey Porter Jr. very soon are going to start getting those turnovers and those interceptions, because the quarterbacks get nervous. They have to pass, and that's what's coming. And this team is going to be unstoppable if the offense can find a way to consistently put up 200 to 300 yards a game with no turnovers.
Yeah, so going back to, and I hate to do this, but Jimmy Garoppolo was more accurate than Kenny Pickett last week. Kenny Pickett only threw for Garoppolo was 64%, and as I'm looking at right here, Pickett was 57.
I'm okay. I'm not necessarily saying the percentage. What I'm saying is, you remember seeing those passes in week 1 and 2 and how they were miles away from these receivers. He was way off target.
Yeah.
At least last week, he was on target. Like, these incompletions were more drops or throwing the ball away instead of taking sacks. So yes, his percentage isn't there, but the decision making is better.
His decision making was better, yes. But...
And his accuracy on at least getting it to a point where the receiver can catch it has improved. That is the point I'm making. Like, yeah, he's not completing more passes than Jimmy Garoppolo, but Jimmy Garoppolo was throwing it to the other team as well, whereas Kenny Pickett was protecting it.
Yeah.
And that is more the point. I'm not necessarily talking about the stats themselves.
It was more the decision making.
What you see with your eyes, and the fact that it's reaching where he wants it instead of being 2 or 3 feet left, right, long, It looked bad in week 1. It looked concerning. Whereas now it's looking like, okay, he's getting his confidence. He's hitting the targets. He's not afraid to throw the ball away. And that is promising for me because that means we're going to see less turnovers. We're going to see hopefully less drops as he continues to make those better decisions and go, okay, well, I'm not going to throw double because it's just going to get swatted away. I'm going to tuck it down. I'm going to run for 2 yards and slide.
Yeah.
Like that is the more the point I'm making. I know his percentage and his QBR isn't great yet, but he's trending in the right direction for that knowledge and that decision making.
Yeah.
That is the positive thing that I'm seeing.
For me, I need to see a lot more with Kenny Pickett moving forward.
Yeah, he's still not even a top 15 at this point. Like, I need more for sure from him.
Yeah, and for me, I'm going to be looking over the next few weeks as a very, very crucial thing for Kenny Pickett because, there was a thing that I sent you this morning where it was Colin Cowherd saying, if I'm the Steelers, I'm sending 3 first-round picks and TJ Watt so I can go draft Caleb Williams. And if Caleb Williams is on this team, whoo! And my goodness. Give me TJ Watt your next
Caleb
3 years of first-round picks.
But 3 years worth of first-round picks. Yeah. George Pickens, who arguably will be your top receiver next year, and TJ Watt, who is the best defensive player in the league right now.
Other than Micah Parsons.
No, I mean, right now, I think TJ Watt is number one.
I'm agreeing. I know. I'm just fucking with you. I'm poking the bear.
Micah Parsons is there. Like, he is great, and he's going to have to do more. He's going to have to be doing TJ Watt levels now that he no longer has Diggs there with him. But, like, I don't see that trade as being worthwhile. And I know it was a spoof trade, but, like, that would be the kind of trade that the Broncos or the Jets would make. That is not something that the Steelers would ever do.
Hey, never say never.
I say never. Unless, you know what? Okay, TJ Watt, like, destroys his leg this year. He's never going to be able to walk again. George Pickens, gets a concussion and his career's over. Then maybe they make that trade. And the Bears might actually accept that trade as well.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens at the end of the year for the Steelers because, again, you don't ever really want to give up on a quarterback going into year number 2. But this year and its quarterback class is so good that you might have to look at if the Steelers don't perform the way that they go and Kenny Pickett struggles throughout the rest of the year, it has to be a real talking point because as I pull up just this year's class, there is without a doubt 5 guys that can go in the first round of this year's draft. And just as I take a look here at all the quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Drake May, both of those guys are going to be gone before the Steelers pick unless they have a top 3 pick, in my opinion.
Yep. Then I don't believe they will have.
No, neither do I. Then you also have Bo Nix, you have Shedeur Sanders, you have J.J. McCarthy, Quinn Ewers, Jordan Travis, Riley Leonard. There is a ton of really good guys. And for instance, if the Steelers are up on the draft board, let's say the Steelers have a top 10 pick, which is realistic, it's possible. With what we've seen from that offense, if Shedeur Sanders is there, you're gonna be very hard pressed for me to not pull the trigger on him if you're the Steelers, because he is an immediate upgrade.
Not for Steelers philosophy football. He has too big of a personality.
He's a better quarterback.
He's a better quarterback, but he's going to expect to be the focal point of every single moment on that team. And when he's not going to like it. You look at guys who had the potential to be the best ever. Antonio Brown was on pace to be the best wide receiver we have ever seen. Mm-hmm. His attitude and his personality got too big. The Pittsburgh Steelers went, we don't care that you could be the best. You do not fit in this city. You do not fit on this team. That is exactly what would happen. If they were to take someone like Shedeur Sanders, yes, he's going to be great. He's going to put up numbers, but he's going to start causing problems in the locker room and ultimately set this team back 3 to 5 years, because then they're going to have to start looking again. Like
I
I'm not
Shedeur
ready to
is
quit on.
not level. He's not his dad. He doesn't have that same personality. He's much more tempered.
Is he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We'll see. Once he starts getting all that money rolling in, he will be.
I mean, he's already getting all that money though.
And I don't think the Steelers have a top 10 pick this year anyway. Honestly,
I don't think so either. But it's more of the situation of
they are a
like
better team this year than they were last year.
I agree with you, but it's still one of those things that if the Steelers do end up, and I'm saying if they do end
Yeah.
up with a top 10 pick, and it's one of those things, if Kenny Pickett doesn't show improvement, it's one of those things that if a guy like Shedeur Sanders is there, you have that top 10 pick, and Kenny Pickett doesn't improve, man, it like if I'm in that position, and I'm saying this is as a far out hypothetical,
Yep.
and if I'm in that situation and the Steelers do have a top 10 pick, which again I think is unlikely, and Kenny Pickett doesn't improve, still not sure if he is or isn't at this point. The jury is still out for me because I need to see a lot more. But if you do have that situation where you're in that spot in this year's class, I'm going to be hard pressed to not make that move.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I know, like, I've been a fan of this team for so long. I know the way that they like to go about this. And honestly, if they're sitting in that spot and Shedeur is there, they're going to look at that and go, you know what? I think we could get 2 firsts for this instead. And they would drop back a couple spots for a team that really wants Shedeur and still get an extra first next year. And I think that is more likely what this team would do. Most teams, I agree, would just take the upgrade. But I don't see, even if Kenny Pickett doesn't improve vastly this year, I don't see this team giving up on him quite yet, because as we've discussed, we see a lot of regression in year 2 for a lot of quarterbacks. We often see this where a guy, he shows flashes in his first year, and then he regresses in his second year, and then he takes off year 3, and I think that is likely what the Steelers will do, is they'll play that out, especially if they decide to shift up the offensive coordinator. They're going to go, look, we've got a top 15 pick. Let's get another piece that we need. Ideally this year, I think it needs to be like that middle linebacker area that they really need to be drafted in the first round, more so than a quarterback.
No, for sure. And again,
And so for them,
all I'm saying, hypothetical. Yep.
I get that. I'm just saying, even hypothetically, the only way I see them drafting a quarterback next year is A, Caleb Williams, or B, Kenny Pickett has a career-ending injury. Those are the only 2 situations that I see them drafting a quarterback next year, myself.
It's going to be really interesting. And again, like I said, I still need to see a lot more from Kenny Pickett. I haven't been convinced this year. Again, Matt Canada has a lot to do with that.
Yes.
But I've seen the top echelon of players. They've looked at bad play calling and bad situations that they've been a part of and been still being able to execute. And again, over these next few weeks, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what the Steelers are going to be able to do.
It is. The next 2 weeks especially, because we didn't talk about it when we were making that pick, but this really is a trap game for the Steelers right now. They're playing a team that's
I said it was a trap game.
Did you? Okay,
Yeah.
I must have missed that part, because it really is, because they need to make sure they're not looking ahead to next week where they play the Baltimore Ravens. And so that's a big thing. They need to perform this week, and then they need to go out there against division rival Baltimore Ravens, who could be sitting with the same record, and they need to find a way to win that. These next 2 weeks are going to define whether this Steelers team are truly going to be fighting for a playoff spot, or whether they're going to be looking at a top 15 pick.
Yeah, so just taking a look here at the Steelers' schedule. Obviously, they face Houston this week. They face Baltimore. They go on the bye week. They go up against the Rams and Jacksonville in their next 2 games afterwards. And
Hmm.
coming off of that bye week, I wouldn't right now, as speaking, again, there could be a lot of things that change over the next few weeks, but I would
Yep.
not say that the Steelers are going to be massive favorites over that Rams team, and especially against that Jags team as well. Um, so it's like going back to what you're saying. These
Hmm.
next 2 weeks are pivotal to what the Steelers franchise is really going to look like for most of the season, I would say. And if the Steelers do end up losing to the Texans,
Hmm.
and this is going to be a game that I'm going to be watching mostly because why the fuck would I want to watch my Bears play?
Right.
And this for the Steelers, they need to be looking at this going, okay, we beat the Browns in a dirty, grindy, fighty, bite and nail type of game. We beat the
Hmm.
Raiders. You're supposed to beat the Raiders. Now you need to go up against Houston in Houston and beat the Texans. And then you
Yep.
have your division rival against Baltimore, which we know is going to be bloody and bruised. So yeah, gonna be really interesting. But I don't know if I have anything still left to add. I don't know if you do. But
Nope.
if we don't, we'd like to say thank you for joining and listening in, hanging out with us. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment on anything that you would like us to talk about potentially in the future. Brendan and for Sterling, thank you all very much for watching.